Before we begin, we want to let you know that some sensitive content is discussed during this episode, so please make sure to take care of yourself while listening.
Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Well, blessings, everyone. This is Tello from the Healing Generations podcast and Healing Generations Institute, and we want to welcome you here today to another journey with us on a dialogue, on an experience in terms of trying to reverberate and bring to life the history, the medicine, the teachings of our generations of folks. And at the same time, hoping that we can heal generations of trauma and the many inequities and struggles that our people have gone through. And so I want to begin, as I always do, with just, welcoming you all in and inviting you to first of all, to take that sacred deep breath in. And as you do that, just land wherever you're at, wherever you're listening from. And with that, we acknowledge the people of the land that you're on. And I'm on the Tangwa Gabrielino land, wherever you're at, just, take a moment just to acknowledge the indigenous folks of that land. As we do that, we also want to bring to mind our ancestors, whoever your ancestors are, your relatives that have come before you that way. And honor them for their teachings, for their blessings, for their sacrifice, but also for the pain that they've carried and that they didn't give up. That they didn't give up, they persevered and they continued to have a vision and have hope for the next generation. And that next generation is all of us. So as you do that, let's think about our communities, about our neighborhoods, our hoods, our barrios, wherever we live, and think about all the people that really are part of that, from the young children to the OGs, to the big mamas, to the abuelitas, to all those people, out there, the young ones and the older ones and the ones that still think they're young but really old, and, all those people that are giving us blessings, but some are giving us struggles too. They're all part of that community. We're going to invite them all in today in memory and in thought that way. And within that, think about your own family, your love family, and your blood family, and all those folks in your family. And then finally, let's take a little breath for yourself. For yourself, we honor and thank you for whoever you're at today, and remind you that you are sacred. You are a blessing just the way you are. We're all on this journey together with our blessings and with our struggles. And we're here to learn and to grow and to heal amongst each other. And so I want to just thank you for being here today. That, as part of that journey, I invite folks in to share their teachings and their legacy. And today I'm very, very, very honored and very blessed to have a Baba, an elder, a wisdom keeper, a brother, a homie, a warrior that I've known for many, many years. And we walked parallel paths, but I've seen, and he's guided and opened up many roads for many, many people, and spoken truth when it's been difficult to speak truth. But because he's spoken truth and open roads, it's really opened the door for many generations, and whom I'm talking about is Baba Shawn Dove, and brother, I just want to thank you. He's got so many accolades, and has been, executive officer of the campaign for Black Male Achievement. He was at one time program director for the Harlem Children's Zone, and he's received, many, many accolades and awards. One of them, he got the key to the city for Louisville by the mayor, Greg Fisher, in 2018. He was one of Ebony Magazine's Power 100. Dude, man.
Wow.
Yeah. That's deep, bro. Right? And so many other things. But the way I know Brother Shawn Dove is just a good brother. Just somebody that you can look to and trust and know when he's in the room, he's got your back. He's got your back, and he's got so many people's back that way. And he's done that for so many years. And so, brother, I want to just welcome you and invite you to welcome the folks that are listening today.
Thank you, Baba Jerry. Thrilled and honored and blessed to be here. I know that we have been trying to do this Healing Generations conversation for some time now. And I believe in divine order, right? And this
Mm-hmm.
is the moment, the season, and the time that we're supposed to be having this conversation. I want to invite and welcome your listeners, your audience, and thank them for joining us on this journey. Echo just the acknowledgement of the ancestors
Mm.
in this moment. I just stand on the shoulders of so many known to me in my lifetime. I was just last week in Florida celebrating my mom's 85th birthday.
Wow.
And I think of her when I have any conversation like this. And a few years ago, I did the African ancestry genealogy and traced my roots to Sierra Leone and the
Mm.
Mende tribe, right? And so from Sierra Leone to Harlem to New Jersey, where I am, I'm just honored to be here. And I would just offer that the most important line in my bio is the bottom line that I am married to my divine mate, Desiree
Mm.
Dove, right? We
Mm.
are
Mm.
31 years in. This is my
Wow.
second marriage, right? We said this is Shawn Dove Uncensored, right?
Let's do it.
Second marriage. And if we got time, we can get into that. And the father of Noah, Maya, Cameron, and Caleb,
Mm.
my children, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I even want to give voice to, so Nia was my firstborn, right? My
Mm-hmm.
firstborn daughter, in her evolving, emerging gender identity. Last year, she shared with me, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with you still calling me daughter, which was a term of
Mm.
endearment,
Yes.
and transitioned from being identifying as Nia to Noah, right?
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
just want to start off, that was like a growth, evolutionary process for me. And the bottom line, you are my child, and I love
Mm.
you. And
Wow.
we are adulting together, right? So in my introduction, that bottom line, my wife and my four children are the most important part of my bio. It's been the most rewarding and
Mm.
challenging
Yeah.
area where I feel I have succeeded the most and where I have failed the most. And I'll just stop there and call in a brother that Baba Ron Walker, right? The founder of
Yes.
Kozbach. And I'm calling Ron in because Ron, for the last year, has been calling me Baba in training. Right?
Mm.
And Ron, I'm 62, Ron is 78, and we know Baba is a
Yeah.
less of a number and an
Mm-hmm.
ethos and how we are
Mm-hmm.
showing up for ourselves and for our families and our communities. But I can't wait to get in touch with Ron right after that and let him know. I said, look, Baba Jerry called me Baba Shawn. So we're going to take
Mm.
off the Baba in training aspect of that. And admittedly, brother, I am like in this liminal emerging
Mm-hmm.
elder
Yes.
season,
Mm-hmm.
letting go of the child prodigy in my head that I thought I was, right?
Mm.
And
Mm.
embracing my emergent elderhood and
Yes.
being really mindful of the story I am telling myself in this journey, right? And catching myself when I lapse into a moment of thinking and telling the story of my best days being behind me
Mm.
and
Mm.
having to catch myself and say, no, Shawn, you have done and experienced some amazing things in your lifetime, but your latter days will
Mm.
be better than your
Mm.
former
Mm-hmm.
days. And I'm
Mm.
just grateful to have a host of elders and mentors in my life that are like evidence-based proof
That's right.
of that prophecy.
Yes. Yes. Well, I appreciate you introducing yourself the way you did with all the complexity of that and honoring your wife and honoring your children in the forefront. To me, what I learned in the neighborhood, but what I've also learned in my indigenous culture is when men honor their families first, and first of all, honor the women first.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a man who we call a palabra, a man of their word, an honorable man, because, we can on the outside have all these accolades, but go in somebody's house.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that would tell you, it doesn't mean you're perfect, but are you engaged? Are you, walking and especially, recognizing that we're always learning. And I know just from that you have been taught something. Someone in your lineage, you mentioned your mom, there are people in your lineage on your journey that have poured into you some teaching, some lessons. And then I also know, just because we know, that you've had challenges along the way. And because we all have, as men of color, that's just, something that's a given. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about, where is Shawn Dove from? Well, where you mentioned several places, but tell me about your people, your family, and how you grew up and where you grew up, bro.
I am, my mom, Deanna, immigrated from Jamaica. She grew up in Kingston, Jamaica, immigrated to the States at 18, had me at 22 years old. She and my dad, Bernard Dove, were not married. They met, my mother was a dancer, right? They were dancers, right? Mm-hmm. And they never lived together. And so, I don't remember a day waking up and saying, "Good morning, Dad." And eventually developed relationship with my father. Was always close to my paternal grandparents, his parents, Chawner and Lucy Dove. Native New Yorker. I've lived in every borough except for Staten Island, right? And, there's still debate whether Staten Island is a legitimate borough. For you Staten Islanders who may be listening, no shade, nothing but love. And God has just blessed me with a really unique life journey from early on, has surrounded me with community and adults that looked out and cared for me. One of the things I really think of in my formative years. So my mother, she was a dancer. She was also a world-class seamstress. She made a decision to abandon her creative pursuits to raise and be a single mom to this bushy, afroed, dimpled little black boy, right? But she intuitively knew that she could not do it alone. And we lived in the South Bronx in my youth, 173rd Street and Bryan Avenue. And I recall when you were doing the opening and giving homage and thanks to the big mamas. And my mother worked and childcare was an issue. And what she did was find, through the grapevine, this woman named Lillian Smith, who in Harlem, 119th Street, 100 West 119th Street and Lenox Avenue, that took care of children. She may not have been licensed, but she had a child care. And similar, several single moms that were looking for the need and the support that my mother was looking for, right? And, there was this levels of trust, right? Yes. And the beauty of this is, so during the week, her name was Lillian, but we called her Lel. I lived with her in Harlem during the week. And on the weekends, I was with my mother. And the beauty of living with Lel, God, it was so animated. I don't know if you ever saw the movie with Hill Harper called Lackawanna Blues.
Oh, yeah.
But it was precisely like that. So Lel ran numbers. And she ran numbers with her partner was Roy Barnes, who was the dad of infamous Harlem drug kingpin named Nicky Barnes, right? And I didn't know until years later that Roy, who she ran numbers with, was Nicky Barnes' dad. And she also had boarders. This was a huge Harlem apartment. One of her boarders was Mr. Archie, a Bajan man, and there was traffic coming to the door on a consistent basis where people were placing their numbers, right? And every day, no matter what the number was, Mr. Archie came, and it's like, The number was 317. Oh, man, I was going to play 317, right? That was his routine. And there were other boarders. Doc was one of the boarders, and he was a chauffeur. And while I was an only child, Lau took care of several young people. So I grew up with sibling-like young people in my life, including her own granddaughter. And once a month, there were like all-night gambling sessions, rent parties in each room, the card tables, right? And so I grew up in my early years with this real sense of community, this sense of Black power, right? Growing up in the cradle of the civil rights movement and remembering Black Solidarity Day, spent time with my grandparents on both sides. And during the summers, my mother would send me away to camp as early as 6 years old. So I had this balance of the concrete jungle, so to speak, and nature, right? And I think my Libra scales have always been, inclined for, that balance. And after fourth grade, my mom and I, we moved to the Upper West Side and began to live together exclusively year round. And so, the Upper West Side was kind of like my coming of age and earlier adolescence. And a youth program called the Dome Project was very formative throughout my life, Jerry. Community-based organizations and institutions like the Dome Project, an organization like Youth Communications, which this year is, in their benefit next month, is honoring me with a Distinguished Alumni Award. Wow. 45 years ago, I had an article in their very first edition of a newspaper, a youth teen newspaper called NYC, New Youth Communications. And so community, extended family, resiliency are all themes in me growing up and coming of age. And when I say resiliency, in my youth, at 9 years old, and I talked about and described how on the weekends I lived with my mom in the South Bronx. And I remember this Christmas after 1971, when I convinced my mother to allow me to travel the New York City subways by myself, right? And I had to go pick up something from my godmother in Harlem. And instead of, on the way back, getting on the uptown side and catching the 2 train back up to the Bronx, I mistakenly got on the downtown side. And my mind was expecting to see 125th Street as the next stop, but then it was like 110th Street. And long story short, this mistake kind of spiraled into, I stayed on the train, wound up getting off at 96th Street, didn't ask anyone for help. I got outside and walked all the way back to 116th Street and Lenox Avenue. Then standing on the platform, was preyed on. Oh, the big piece of this, like I told you, so my godmother ran numbers, a lot of hustlers around. One of the hustlers, DeWitt Thompson, who was actually the father of Lydia Thompson, my godmother's granddaughter, he thought it was a good idea to buy me and Michael King, another young man, he was a couple of years older than me, fur coats for Christmas. So here I am, 9 years old, traveling the train with a fur coat. And so I was victimized. I was abducted. And I write about this harrowing experience in my book, I Told America, on loving and leading Black men and boys. And I shared, Jerry, about that story. For years, I described that as my Harlem resiliency story. Right? The kidnap story, the fur coat story, and how I survived the mean streets of New York City and Harlem. And it wasn't until I was 51 years old, I was at a retreat in the redwoods of Santa Clara Mountains, this True North retreat, when we had to describe a crucible moment in our lives.
Mm.
And it was telling this story as an adult that something broke open.
Mm.
I cried more as an adult, more than I did as a 9-year-old when this experience happened.
Yeah.
And I discovered that two things were true. Yes, it was a Harlem resiliency story. I was resilient. How I got out of that,
Yeah.
how I survived that was resiliency, was divine intervention. But it was also trauma. It was also unrecognized and reconciled trauma. And I was blessed I believe we can be catalysts of our own healing, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the Resurrection Sunday of 2021, right, 4 years ago, it was upon me to reenact that day. And I
Wow.
drove up to, at the time, folks were still wearing pandemic masks. I drove to the Bronx where I lived, the building on 174th Street and Bryan Avenue. And as an adult, I did that journey to Harlem and went to the stoop of my godmother, turned back around to make the trip back home. And instead of getting on the downtown side, I rightfully got on the uptown side.
Hmm.
And while standing on the platform waiting for the number 2 train, Big Shawn had a conversation with Little Shawn.
Hmm.
And it was a forgiven conversation, right? You made a mistake. It was not your fault.
Right.
And got on the train and made it back, right? And that healing journey continues, but that day allowed me to begin the process in that really traumatic moment for me of forgiving myself, right? And so just wanted to share that from talk about a healing generations, right?
Yes,
From
yes,
the
yes.
9-year-old Shawn to 55-year-old Shawn. And when I did that trip, I was 58, right? And so somebody needs to hear that's listening today, that
Yeah,
you
yes,
can be
yes.
the catalyst to your own healing.
Wow, wow, wow. Yeah. That touches me real deeply because I know in my spirit all those people that surrounded you and took care of you and loved you up and protected you built that spiritual resiliency in you. Because similarly, there's other young men that go through that and they break apart as opposed to being able, their spirit, to hold it until they're ready. But I also know in my life and in speaking with many elders is that our ancestors have gone through similar things and never got a chance to redo, to forgive, to heal. And what you may not realize, what I'm realizing now, is that when we do this healing work like that, we're not only healing for ourselves.
Yes.
You're healing for your daddy, for your grandpa, for your grandma, for the generations that never got a chance to go back on that train, to make that other choice, to forgive yourself, and to allow yourself to be free,
Yep.
And so the work that we do internally reverberates generationally in so many ways, and I want to just acknowledge you, Baba. See, and I call you Baba, elder. There's some old guys there, they're just olders, man. They ain't elder. The one. They're still doing the same okey-doke shit they were doing since they were 15 and still trying to trick and, do all. They're still in their pain. They're still in their woundedness. But an elder, and what I call a Baba, you can tell they're doing their work. You can tell they're trying to unravel all that stuff so that their relationships and their children can be better, so they don't have to carry it. They don't have to do the unraveling. They don't have to do the redoing for what we have not completed.
That's so beautiful, and thank you for that. And what I would amplify, so the unraveling, the uncovering, the recovering is an ongoing journey,
Oh, yeah.
right? It never ends, right? Just last week, I was telling my therapist, why is this shit so hard, right? I would think that at this point, I would have it all
Oh, yeah.
together, right? And I'm in recovery, right? I have 35 half years in recovery. And one
Congratulations,
of
brother.
the slogans, mantras is that the more you recover, the more you uncover in
That's
your
right.
healing journey. And there was so much in between that 9-year-old traumatic day and that 55-year-old doing that trip. And you talk about the healing and talking about being in recovery, shortly after that 9-year-old day, I picked up my first joint and I picked up my first drink
Mm-hmm.
and was on a run at a very young
Young age.
age, numbing and hiding and searching, and to the point where I guess the theme of train platforms here is that towards the end of my active addiction, I thought the only solution for me, Baba Jerry, was suicide, right? And
Yes.
I had it
Yes.
all planned out
Mm-hmm.
of jumping on the tracks at Penn Station. At the time, I had come back to be the executive director of the youth program, the Dome Project, that
Mm.
shifted the trajectory of my life in my early adolescence. And I had it all. I was going to jump and grab the third rail.
Mm.
And there was divine intervention
Yes.
and so much of the richness and texture of my life was developed and just inspired when I made that decision to choose life, right?
Yes.
And go into rehab and begin my recovery journey. So there was a lot of resiliency, a lot of pain. Don't want to romanticize, from
No, no,
9 to
no,
55 and having this
no.
epiphany. There were these near death, and particularly that moment. And so, as I started this conversation, if I would have grabbed that third rail,
Mm.
there would not be the divine mate, Desiree. There would not be my 4 children that I
Right.
talked
Right.
about. There would not be, a lot of folks know my work through the campaign for
Yeah.
Black
That's
Male
right.
Achievement. So much of that would not have happened.
Right.
And any opportunity I get to tell and encourage someone to hold on,
Yeah.
that making a permanent decision while you are in a momentary moment. And I lift this up, Baba, because we just found out there's this brother in Durham, North Carolina, part of the mentoring movement. He attended Rumble, Young Man Rumble
Mm-hmm.
9,
Yes.
and last week committed suicide.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
11-year-old daughter.
Mm.
And just praying for his family, his spirit, and what he must have been going through to get to that moment, right?
Yes.
And I just bring that up because there may be someone that just stumbled across this podcast
Right.
that might be in that space when you're talking about healing generations. I had an executive coach few years ago that took me through an assignment of writing my eulogy, and I have on my wall over here the 2 large sheets of papers with the graphic on it, and it's really powerful of exercise. And I always say I want my eulogy to serve as someone's life epilogue,
Mm.
that someone hears my story, hears or reads my eulogy, that feels that they're at the end of the road, and because of how I lived, that my story inspired them to not say their last chapter is done, that there's an epilogue to their own story, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And, and I just want to appreciate you for sharing that deep part of your journey. I've been doing this work for 50 years, man. And I've had the privilege of sitting with so many men and had dialogue in healing circles, but also just in conversation with so many men. And all of us have been there. We have all been there at one time where something happened, where we're trying so hard, man, doing the best we can. And shit still keeps happening, keep messing up, we keep falling, and we wonder. And I wondered this at 13, man. My dad had died, and I was just tired. I didn't want to take my life, but I was tired. And I'm trying to go to school, and I'm still messing. I got an F in algebra. Man, come on, man. And I was ready to take my life too. And what happened to me, because I had already decided that, I knew all I had to do was walk 2 blocks over to the other neighborhood where the other, gang was there. All I had to do is write on the wall. They take me out and they think it's gang violence. But it's really, I was just tired, man. It didn't, And as I was standing there, I already made the decision. I smelled my grandmother, and I smelled the powder she wore, and I felt her spirit. And I knew that I couldn't do that. That would dishonor her. And so what many times we're not told is we're not walking alone. Our ancestors are always with us. And if we open the path and just take the time, there's always someone there or some kind of divine intervention. And so, I want to say to the listeners, because I know that when you get to that place, reach out. There are places. At the end of this podcast, we'll list some numbers. But we're also available all the time. And what you, Baba, have tried to do, and what I have tried to do, is increase the network of folks out there that are available, especially to men of color, and Black and brown men especially.
Yes.
And we don't talk about our depression and our anxiety and all. We are made to believe, suck it up, man. Don't don't be weak, but the reality is that's a colonized way that we've been taught.
Yes, individualized, I can self-help, I can white knuckle.
And what we need to realize as part of our true culture is that of our responsibility is caring for ourselves too, because we are connected to so many folks. And imagine who would be impacted if Shawn Dove or Jerry Tello did something like that. So many people, right? And so, I want to lift this up as a teaching, for all of our listeners, that Creator has given you a sacred purpose.
Yes.
Right. And part of that journey, as we all know, is some heavy struggles. Sometimes, and when you're going to doubt, and when you're going to struggle, and you're going to feel pain, and you're going to feel hopeless, but that's part of the journey.
Your purpose is forged, refined, transformed through the pain.
Yes.
On my playlist at my memorial service, it will be Frankie Beverly, Joy and Pain, Sunshine and Rain. That is on the playlist, because when I look back, I'm like, thank God for the struggle. I may not have been saying that when I was going through it. Thank God for the pain. Thank God for recovery. No, it was not fun, right? When I made that decision. But something you said touched me about, Black and brown men growing up in this country. And I am so grateful that I came of age in my adulthood when it was okay, or I was found in a network, in a circle of other men, that it was okay to say, I love you.
Wow.
It was okay to show emotion.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of separate conversations that I had with my late father-in-law and my dad, when they were telling stories describing when they left their family. So my biological father and mother were never together, but he married, and I have a twin brother and twin sister from that marriage. But I remember him describing, and both of them, it was eerie, used the same term. They said that they felt the walls closing in on them and they left.
Mm.
Their generation,
Yes.
it was not okay to have a conversation like we're having with another. Therapy? Are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. Sitting in a healing circle and asking for, and so they just left. And it made me just doubly grateful to say, because, I've had that feeling as a father and a husband of the walls closing in.
Yes.
But I was blessed with tools and a understanding that my vulnerability is a saving grace and superpower that generations of men before me were not given permission to ask for help. And both of them, and how they use that same term, the walls were closing in. And so I'm grateful for you, and I thank you, and I know the work that you and Baba Hector and the rest of the team have done over the decades and the many healing circles, and just being in the green room and your son, Emilio, setting us up, right, for this conversation is talking about generational healing and generational blessings. So thank you, man. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for acknowledging Emilio, my son. He's got 2 boys, and I see it. I see it right in front of me. My little grandson, Elias, who's going to turn 4. I go spend time with him once a week and play. And he taught me a new word, right? He taught me a new word a little while ago. He said, Tata, he's called me Tata. Tata, let's go out and play outside together. Together, we got to do together, and he taught me the word, and it was different than together, because when I began to understand him, he says together, and it meant not just doing things side by side. It means that there was a spirit connection between him and I,
tethering, right?
Yeah, and he invited me into his world, into his journey. What a privilege, I mean, for me to have a grandson. But that comes from, my son and my daughter-in-law, what they've already breathed into him and gave me the privilege, right? To spend time, to play, to learn, and I think that is intrinsically the work that we have been doing, and that you have been doing, and you have been opening up too, is opening up spaces and places and processes because some people don't have dads that are available. Some don't have grandfathers. So we become their grandpas. We become the babas. We become the elders. And that's why our communities always did things generationally, always did things that way, and we had to be, when in 1988, when I first gathered with these group of men, we were ready to do programming and develop programs and projects and all of that. And as we began to do our initial acknowledgement, what we realized is, even though we were the teachers and the therapists, and that we were all jacked up, right? Even though we had made it so-called systemically, we had these, colonized views, patriarchy, misogyny, all this other stuff that we were living that we didn't realize had penetrated in our own culture that way. And so we had to make a commitment as men of color that we have some work to do in order that we can honor the women and honor the children and honor each other and break down even the silos between black and brown and other people. What society wants to do is break us up. And what we chose to do is, no, we're going to heal together, that way. And so that's part of your legacy, Baba. That's part of your legacy in all the work that you've done. And I just want to acknowledge you. I want to appreciate you. I want to appreciate and thank your ancestors, thank your wife, your children, thank all those that have believed in you and stood by you, even in your struggling moments. Because, we still get there. We still go back to them wounded ways. And sometimes, and you need, sometimes, in my life, My companion, she sometimes she just looks at me and shakes her head. But she's patient. She don't
Yes,
criticize.
yes,
She
yes.
lets me go through it and hugs me and then says, "Okay, let's talk." And she's my teacher. She's my teacher that way. And and I'm sure your wife.
My wife always, she said, the reason why we're still together after 31 years is because of me, right? Not me, but her, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yes. And, oh man, just the healing aspect and the power of healing in community,
Yes.
the power of being in circles of trust,
Yes.
the power of, I believe our stories are our strength.
Yes.
And our wisdom is our wealth. And sometimes another brother needs to hear you be vulnerable and share your story.
Yes.
And I also believe one of my mantras is that even broken crayons placed in the right hands
Oh yeah.
can be used to create a life masterpiece.
Yeah.
And this is part of the 12 steps recovery and sharing stories and being able to identify. And you know what? We may have differences in culture and social economic background, but there are some commonalities around healing and trauma. When I tell my story becomes your story and allows you to share your unique story. So that storytelling piece and that healing in community is just so powerful.
Well, and I think, for me, I grew up in Compton, and I grew up in a black-brown neighborhood. What is not evident, if you look at my bio and you look at people look at me and, all of that, is that I grew up in my own family and my family loved me and did the best they could. There was the traumas and the blessings.
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up in a black and brown neighborhood and my best friend, Tyrone, he was my best friend. So I'd be at his house sometimes and his grandma, Miss Mosley, she was always there. And I remember one day that, there was some trouble in my house. My parents were fighting and stuff. And I went over to pick up Tyrone and she saw me and she said, "What's the matter, baby?" "Nothing." "What happened?" "Nothing."
Mm-hmm.
And then she said, "Okay, I know. Sometimes things happen in your house and, it don't make you feel good." And she told me, she says, "You know what, baby, I want you to know something. You one of my babies. You one of mine too. And if you don't feel good in your house, you can come over here to Miss Mosley's house. You're always welcome here. I got you. I always got something cooking." And it seemed like a little, to me, that was huge. So in my journey, my African rooted relatives breathed love into me and took care of me too. And what people don't realize is that our histories are intermeshed, they're intermingled, and
Yes.
this society wants to break us apart and make us seem, but we're not that way, And so I know that your work is so significant. And I want to ask you, I know there's so much we could talk about, but I want you to lift up a little bit of that work that you're doing now, the significant work that you're doing now, because it is important and it has taken a lot of work and it's not easy and not everyone can move things the way, Baba, you've been able to move it. So can you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing now and some of your vision now for what's going on?
Thank you for that. And, I would even I think of it less as work.
Yes.
And more as ministry and purpose.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And my journey has intersected youth development, community building and community organizing, philanthropy, media literacy, and youth arts. I am publishing. I'm currently, I have multiple platforms. I want to lift up my current main work is with an organization called New Profit, which is a venture philanthropy firm that's been around for 26 years. And what we do is we invest in, social entrepreneurs that are making change, bold ideas, specifically around democracy and education, economic mobility, and mental health. And yes, we are investing capital, and it's unrestricted capital. But the beauty of the work is just I'm a connector, right? I love making connections and helping to be a network weaver. And so the work at New Profit is really like connecting social entrepreneurs with each other, connecting them with donors. What brings me most joy is I curate a biannual gathering called The Well, right? And Baba Hector has been to The Well and has spoken to The Well. And New Prophets had 26 years of gathering leaders. I joined the organization 3 years ago, and coming out of the pandemic, we rebranded what was called the Gathering of Leaders to The Well to really engender this ethos of healing, restoration. The vision of New Prophet is that it is going to take a multiracial, intergenerational, cross-sector coalition to like ignite the American evolution that this country needs and that this country has never seen. Which doesn't mean when folks see multiracial that you leave your unique identity at the door, right?
Right.
And so that's part of my current work. And the vision for it is to invest and touch as many social entrepreneurs of color. And how do I be a catalyst and even a midwife and help them to birth breach dreams. But I am also a publisher and writer at heart. Right.
Yeah, talk about your book.
My first published, and I've done publishing projects throughout my life, right? From I talked about being a senior and my first byline with Youth Communications. And I've published with my late best friend. We did something called Pocket Magic books. This was like early 2000 inspirational books. A book I wrote was an inspirational book called The New Me in the New Millennium. And have published, my own newspapers, Proud Papa, which was a news magazine for African-American dads, right? Not the celebrity dads, but the next door dads telling their stories. When I was at the Harlem Children's Zone, launched a youth newspaper called Harlem Overheard, and allowing young people to be, megaphones of their views and their visions, and to have their voices heard, not only in Harlem, but the paper was distributed nationally. And 3 years ago, published I to America on Loving and Leading Black Men and Boys, co-authored by my friend of almost 40 years, Nick Childs, who just happened to be a publisher, a Pulitzer-winning journalist. Wow. And so I to America is equal parts chronicling the work of the Campaign for Black Male Achievement, which I launched at Open Society Foundations in 2008, which was originally supposed to be a 3-year campaign. Philanthropy. We're going to take a generational, century-long challenge, and we're going to solve this in a 3-year grant-making cycle. That's a whole nother podcast. So it chronicles the development and the growth of the campaign. We tell the stories of Jamari in Detroit and Romero in Oakland. You may know Romero from Kingmakers of Oakland, and how community mentors, this sense of having and instilling and believing in young people and believing and loving our young boys before they learn to believe and love in themselves. And part of I to America is my memoir and my comment of age as a Black man in America, right? And, the title of the book, we borrow from Langston Hughes' classic I Too poem that he wrote in 1926. And I struggled through the completion of this book. And many a night I prayed, I was like, Langston, brother, you end this poem with one day talking to America, you will see how beautiful I am and become ashamed. And I was like, I don't know if America is capable of that quality and that humility and that empathy. And I said, we're going to keep plugging, but I don't know. We're going to make sure that we look in the mirror and we tell ourselves that we are beautiful.
That's right. That's
and
right.
The book is also a manifesto, and I've always used publishing and writing as community building. So there are many manifestos at the end of the book by authors and leaders and movement builders like Jackie Copeland, Ron Walker, Reverend Emma Jordan Simpson. And the question for their mini manifestos was for them to write about where do we go from here, right? And so this is or was like the book I have been longing to publish like all of my life, because it was Man Child and the Promised Land by Claude Brown that had a transformational impact on my life as a 13-year-old. Before the basketball team was able to go to the gym to practice, our coach, John Simon, we had to read in a circle. And we read a couple books, but the book that transformed us was Claude Brown's Man Child and the Promised Land. And after practice, we went on a corner, we were hanging out and we were smoking joints and drinking Old English. But we were talking about Sonny and the characters in the book and Roz the Exhorter. And also my mentor at the Dome Project, he was an author. And I remember a shipment of his books. He wrote a book called To Become Somebody, Growing Up Against the Grain of Society. And I remember cracking the cardboard book box open and when the books were delivered and holding this book in my hand, and it flickered a flame inside of me knowing that I would do something like that, right? And so one of the things now, when you talk about the vision for my work, the Campaign for Black Male Achievement sunsetted as a 501c3 in 2020, and the heart of the pandemic transformed it into an LLC, which is now the Corporation for Black Male Achievement, which is a platform for curating and publishing stories of loving, learning, and leading by for Black men and boys. And the next book that has been stuck in the birth canal, the creative birth canal, is a leadership book called The 7 C's of Deep End Leadership. And it's based on a workshop I've been doing for 15 years. And I'm just saying it out loud so someone else can hear it, right? And I got folks in my network that I've brought along on this journey, like what's going on with the book, right?
We're gonna make it happen.
Make it happen. And I will say that when I mentioned part of my ethos is being a midwife, I was in the delivery room for all 4 of my children. And my last born, Caleb, twin boy, his brother, Cameron, 9 minutes earlier had popped into the scene. My wife, Desiree, popped out her 3rd child, pushed out her 3rd child, not to make it trite, and so it was an easy thing to do. But Caleb was breech. And no matter how hard Desiree pushed, Caleb was not coming out. 9 minutes after his twin brother arrived, Caleb's vital signs began to drop. And the hospital was not ready for a C-section. And the doctor said, I have to go and pull him out. And I witnessed right there in that delivery room, my son being born breached. My wife said that was the most painful thing that she ever experienced in her life. But the message and the metaphor for me in that moment was that we all got some stuff inside of us that we're trying to push out alone. that until we get in emotional, spiritual stirrups, get open, get vulnerable, and say to a trusting soul, I got something inside of me and I need your help to pull it out.
Mm.
And in a snapshot capsule, Baba Jerry, that's the ethos of who I am. And helping folks that have breached dreams, including myself, and practicing and asking for help to deliver what I believe God truly, what we have to deliver to the world, what God truly wants us to deliver to the world, we will never, ever push out alone.
Yes.
And we need midwives and even elder babas like you and I are metaphorical and mystical and in real midwives to others.
You know, I appreciate you sharing that and the way you shared it as well. You know, I don't know, you know, especially right now, you know, there's been so much going on in this country. I don't know if this world and this country will ever be able to recognize the beauty and the brilliance and the sacredness of your people and my people. But let me tell you that I do.
Amen.
I see you. I see your beauty. I see your sacredness. I see that holiness. I see that sacred purpose in you. And I see it that it's been manifested through so many other people that mention your name, that lift you up, that see you as a brother, that see you as a homie, that see you as a support in so many ways. And I know now, you know, that it comes with a powerful wife and some kids and some elders and some people along the journey, even, you know, when you're playing the numbers. You know, I right away resonated with that, playing the numbers, because in the neighborhood, you know, my parents had a cleaners, and the guy that used to deliver the clothes, and he used to have a little van, and I'd be at the cleaners. Little Jerry, you want to go for a ride? We go for the ride, and we drop off the clothes. And one of the places we drop off the clothes was a numbers place. And I go there clearing the clothes, and all these guys in there playing cards and dominoes, and I remember that, you know. And they always greet me, give me a little candy, you know. I mean, it was beautiful, you know. These men that they were trying to make a living, trying to do what they do to support their families, you know. They always treated me with respect, you know. And people don't understand the struggle sometimes of you trying to figure out those numbers. Is this number going to be right so that I can pay these bills, so I can live my life, so I can feel beautiful, even though the world doesn't see me as beautiful, you know. And that's the hard one right there.
Yes, it is.
Know? How do you get through when the world doesn't see you as beautiful, but you got to try and live another day? As we close today, you know, I want to ask you, as an elder, as a Baba, what counsel would you give this next generation? You know, right now is a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty, you know, but you lived through fear and uncertainty, so you know that as well. What kind of counsel would you give this next generation?
Wow. One, your story is your strength, and your wisdom is your wealth. No matter how old you may be listening to this, and that there is someone waiting to hear your story. I share with young people that someone you don't even know is rising up in their leadership calling only because they're watching you rise up in yours. It's really important to have mentors, coaches, and therapists in your life, and that it is okay to ask for help, that you are enough. I want folks to know that there's no Calvary coming to save the day in our communities.
Yeah.
That that's right, look in the mirror. We are the iconic leaders that we have been waiting for.
Yes.
Curators of the change that we're seeking to see. Comparison is a calling killer. That God has given you your own unique race to run. run your race and don't compare your race to others, right? Comparison is a calling killer. I have so many mission mantras, Baba, Jerry, right? And one of my books is like, gotta make sure that I, get high on my own supply, so to speak,
There you
right?
go.
And the mission mantras that I share, oh, Shawn, where are you not practicing that mantra, right? And
There you
one of
go.
them is also, you have nothing to prove, only gifts to share.
Mm.
And every once in a while, I gotta catch myself, right? There are times where I'm manifesting that mantra, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are times I was like, hold up,
Mm-hmm.
you're being real performative right now. You are in a real proven. What's up with that? I thought you said you have nothing to prove, only gifts to share, Shawn. Why are you proving in this moment or trying to prove in this moment? And just thank God for self-awareness, right? To you're human, I would say. Allow yourself the gift of imperfection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I appreciate all of that. And as I'm listening to you, I'm grateful for people around me that remind me that I'm imperfect sometimes, and remind me that I make mistakes, and remind me that I'm coming out of pocket with stuff, and in spite of that, still love me. In spite of that, still accept me, and in spite of that, still appreciate me. And with that, I just wanted to appreciate you. I want to appreciate you. And thank you for sharing. We got so much more to talk about, and we
Yes.
will. This is just the entry point. But I want to just, as we close today, just remind the listeners, to connect with Brother Shawn Dove and his book and his teachings, and follow him. You can see him. We have the link that we'll provide for you as well. But one of the teachings is, if you're stuck, if you're in need of help, if you're in need of some support, reach out.
Yes.
Years ago, there were not resources. Now there are. There are resources that are available. We need you. We need every one of you that is listening right now, because the children are watching. The children are waiting, and our ancestors are there with us along the way.
Amen.
And as we close today, I just want to thank all of you folks for listening, remind you of your sacredness and the blessings of who you are, and let us live this good life. Let us live this life, and so that we can do our own healing work, so that the next generations has more blessings and less struggle. And may the Creator bless you, and may the ancestors follow you and guide you, and may you have a beautiful, wonderful, joyous day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.